Tomorrow morning, before you've spoken a single word to another human being, you're going to do something almost no person in history could ever do. You'll walk into a room, look at a flat piece of glass and see your own face. Perfectly, sharply, in full detail. You won't think twice about it. But for more than 300,000 years, that was impossible. For almost the entire existence of our species, a human being could go their whole life and never once know exactly what they looked like. Think about how strange that is. Your ancestors knew the faces of their children. They knew their enemies, their friends, every single person in their tribe. They knew every face in the world, except their own. The best they ever got was a trembling reflection in a pool of water, gone the instant they reached to touch it. So what happens to a mind when it can suddenly watch itself anytime it wants? The answer reaches into places you'd never expect. Into art, into mental illness, and into the very idea of who you think you are. Let's start with the mirror itself, because the mirror is far younger than you think. The oldest ones ever found are made of obsidian, black volcanic glass, polished by hand around 8,000 years ago in what's now Turkey. They're dim, dark, and barely bigger than your palm. The Egyptians later shaped polished bronze into mirrors. But every one of them had the same flaw. The image was murky, golden, warped. You couldn't see yourself, only a ghost of yourself. A truly clear mirror is shockingly recent. In the 1500s, glassmakers on a little island near Venice called Murano learned to back glass with a thin layer of mercury and tin. And for the first time in human history, a person could look at a wall and see themselves exactly as they were. It was so precious that a single Venetian mirror could cost more than a painting by a master. When the King of France built his Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, its 357 mirrors were a staggering show of power, like paving a room in gold. Then, in 1835, it all collapsed. A German chemist named Justus von Liebig discovered how to coat glass with a microscopically thin layer of real silver. Suddenly, mirrors were cheap, flawless, everywhere. And within a single generation, ordinary people could study their own faces in perfect detail whenever they liked, for the first time ever. We treat that like nothing. It was one of the quietest revolutions in human history. But here's what's fascinating. Recognizing the face in the mirror as yours is one of the rarest abilities on the planet. In 1970, a psychologist named Gordon Gallup Jr. designed a clever experiment to test it. He'd secretly put a mark on an animal, a spot of dye it couldn't feel, then place a mirror in front of it. Would the animal touch the mark on its own body, or reach for the mirror? Almost every animal on Earth fails. They don't see themselves. They see a stranger, a rival, an intruder to be fought or fled from. Only a tiny club passes. Great apes, dolphins, elephants, and a single bird, the magpie. That's nearly the entire list. Even Charles Darwin was gripped by this. In 1838, he held a mirror up to an orangutan named Jenny at the London Zoo, just to see what she'd do. And human babies don't recognize themselves until about 18 months old. So understand what that means. Knowing the reflection is you is one of the most advanced things a brain can do. And we now ask ours to do it hundreds of times a day. But the mirror didn't just let us recognize ourselves. It quietly began to change us. And the first people to feel it weren't scientists. They were artists. Before clear mirrors, self-portraits were almost impossible. How do you paint a face you've never really seen? But as Renaissance mirrors improved, something exploded. In the year 1500, a German painter named Albrecht Dürer painted himself staring straight out of the canvas, calm and symmetrical, almost like a saint. The Italian artist Parmigianino painted his own reflection inside a curved mirror, his hand looming toward you. And Rembrandt painted himself nearly 80 times across his life, using his reflection to track his own face aging year after year. For the first time, humans became the subject of their own gaze. And then a few thinkers began to suspect something stranger still. That the mirror wasn't just showing us ourselves, it was helping to build the self in the first place. In 1902, a sociologist named Charles Horton Cooley called it the looking glass self. We don't really know who we are on our own, he argued. We assemble our identity out of how we imagine other people see us. We are reflections of reflections. Decades later, the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan went further, describing what he called the mirror stage. The moment a baby first sees itself and falls in love with the image, because that image looks whole, complete, coordinated, in a way the baby doesn't yet feel inside. And Lacan believed we spend the rest of our lives chasing that perfect reflection and quietly grieving that we never become it. But here's the part nobody talks about. There's an almost eerie proof that the mirror has rewired your brain, and you've felt it your whole life. The face you know best, the one you've practiced 1,000 expressions in, is backwards. It's a mirror image. So when you see a photo of yourself, you're seeing the face the whole world sees. And it looks wrong. Subtly, maddeningly wrong. That's not insecurity. That's neuroscience. In 1968, a psychologist named Robert Zionk discovered the mere exposure effect. The more we see something, the more we like it. And in 1977, researchers ran the perfect test. They showed people a photo of their own face and a mirror image of it and asked which they preferred. The people preferred the mirror image, the one they'd grown up with. But their friends and partners preferred the photograph, the real them. Sit with that. You've spent your entire life in love with a version of your face that no one else has ever seen. So what happens when you take this ancient, mirror-rewired brain and hand it a camera that points back at itself? You get something our species has never faced before. In 2010, the front-facing camera arrived. By 2013, selfie was the Oxford Dictionary's word of the year. We weren't just glancing anymore. We were studying, zooming, filtering, comparing our real faces against an endless river of flawless, edited ones. One survey estimated a young person today will take more than 25,000 selfies in their lifetime. And doctors began seeing something new. In 2018, researchers named it Snapchat dysmorphia. Patients asking surgeons not to look like a celebrity, but to look like their own filtered selfies. Then in 2020, a Harvard dermatologist named Shadi Kourosh identified Zoom dysmorphia as millions trapped on video calls spent hours staring at their own faces and slowly learning to hate them. A creature that spent 300,000 years looking outward now spends its days staring back at itself. Even our language remembers it. The phrase self-conscious once simply meant aware that you exist, a calm, philosophical idea. It only twisted into meaning anxious, embarrassed, painfully visible to yourself in the 1800s. The exact century cheap mirrors flooded into ordinary homes. The word changed because we changed. The Romans went further. They believed breaking a mirror cursed you with 7 years of bad luck, because they were sure your reflection held a piece of your very soul. So here's a question worth sitting with. That harsh little voice, the one picking apart your face in every photo, certain everyone notices the flaws you obsess over. What if it isn't vanity? What if it isn't weakness, or something wrong with you? What if it's just an ancient, outward-facing brain, doing exactly what it evolved to do, trapped in front of an invention it was never built to face? For more than 300,000 years, human beings were born, and lived, and loved, and died with only the faintest idea of what they looked like. They knew the stars. They knew the faces of the people they loved. But their own face stayed a gentle mystery their whole lives, and they were free of it. We traded that freedom for a glowing reflection we carry in our pockets, and we check it dozens of times a day without ever asking what it's doing to us. The most watched face of your entire life is your own, and you were never meant to see it at all.